We talked about CSS selectors and we focused on the simple CSS selectors, and this is just like a recap of what we did. So there are 4 main CSS selector I want you guys to focus on, and the purpose of selector is so that we can pick the element we want to style. You know that everything is made up of elements in an HTML page, right? And before you can style anything, you need to be able to target that HTML element, and that's the purpose of what CSS selector is all about. Selector is a way for you to say you are targeting a particular element, and there are various ways in which you can target those elements. So the ones we explained last time was name, ID, and class. So this is a recap as I mentioned. I'm going to show you the 3 ones I talked about, but I'm going to introduce the last one, which is the 4th one, which is universal selector. What that does is just to select everything on the page. It's not something you'll be using often because you don't want to style everything, kind of. So, but it's out there, it's available. If you are doing a kind of a test and you want to style everything, so you want to use that. But most time for larger projects, you will rarely use this kind of selector. So let's start from the beginning. Element selector. That's more of like selector by name. You are selecting elements by name. And this one is very easy. That was what I explained quickly the first time. Meaning you can style elements by the name of the element. If you want to style an H1, H2, a paragraph, you just put what? You put the name of the element. And then you put your curly braces and you write your style right away. That's the first one we have here. And it's called name selector or element selector. The other one we talked about is also ID selector. Remember in our form, the usage of our form, we're doing our form, we used ID selector, or rather we introduce ID. And the purpose of ID is such that you want to uniquely identify that element in the entire page. So you can say, oh, this ID, this is what I want to style it. And the way to go about it, you saw the special character that was placed in front of the name of the ID. The name of the ID is whatever name that you give it. Whatever name that you give it becomes the name. And then you see the pound sign in front or hash sign in front. The last one we have is the class selector. The class selector, again, you need to specify a class attribute, and the value is whatever you decide to give it. Instead of a pound sign, it has to be a dot notation. You use a dot and you have it defined. I've started today's class. The idea of a box model is to tell you that everything within an HTML page, what the HTML render is being displayed as a box. I'll repeat that again. Everything that the HTML has as an element is being represented as a box. Meaning, as a box, you have the content, you have the padding, you have the margin, you have the border. You might have seen time without number, we're writing padding, margin, border, and what have you. So this class is for us to explain what all those things are. So element sitting on its own has its own content. When you write an element, there's a content of that element. So that's the default thing you have there. By default, an element has a content. That content has a padding. A padding is a space between the content and the border. So you saw the diagram on the right hand side. That gives you an idea. So if we have a P tag, a paragraph tag, the content of that paragraph tag will sit right in here. Then above it will be the padding. We're going to demonstrate this, by the way. Everything above it becomes the padding. And what follows next becomes what? The border. Continue, you then have the margin last, sitting last. So in order not to go right away into the system, let's demonstrate this, and then we'll come back to continue the presentation so that we don't miss what we are about to explain. Let me use this. Box model. This is everything we're going to talk about today. We're going to be talking about box model, display types, and CSS units. That's what we want to do today. So I clear everything right here, and we are presented with this. I want to use this to showcase, to tell you those invisible things you are not seeing. I told you that this paragraph, this content here, has the content is visible, which is the box model. That is what we are seeing that is visible to the user. The other one that is not visible is the margin and padding and border. So we want to make them visible. So let's go ahead and style our paragraph. So let's use what we've learned so far to style our paragraph. I can use class, right? And I want to call this box. So this is me using a class selector. I want to use a class selector to style this paragraph here. And a way to implement that is to put our box here as the name of the class. Then you specify your open parenthesis, your block code. And I want to start showing you those. I want to show you as an evidence that this is a block, a box model. So let's start by specifying the border. We'll make that red and solid. So the first thing you see, let me make it very bold so it should be obvious. So you can see that this denotes that we are working with a box. Fine. Let's now look at the padding, because what this says is that we have a content and we have a padding next. So let's see the evidence that the padding is there. Let's add the padding to it. So let's do 10. Let's do 20. So do you see that distinction between what the content is saying and then the edge? Let's make it 30. So do you see when I highlight this using our normal mouse to highlight, you can see that there's a distance between the content and the border. Exactly what we have in our screenshots here. So you have this content sitting here, then there's a padding outside it. After that padding, what is next is your border, which is obvious because we made it visible. Let me make it more bold. After that border, we are being told, based on documentation, that we have margin sitting right outside. So let's confirm that there's a margin outside. So the way to confirm that is to actually put a margin there and then see if we have that gap, that margin spelled out. So let's do margin. Let's do same 30 so that we'll have that view. So we have our 30 there, and immediately we did that, you can see that before, let's make it very obvious. Let's do 50. So you can see the distance. It jumped from where it was before. It was somewhere here before, and it jumped down here. So that gives you the evidence that any element that you have possesses all these three things. So they possess the ability for you to update their padding, set the border width, the color, the type of the border, and also specify the margin. Now all these three things allow you to move the elements in the way you want, to shape them in the form that you want. This understanding of box model is key to anything you are going to do. If you've been paying attention most of the time, you will notice I use padding, margin very often, and I use border. And the idea of most of the time I use border is to show me where I am in the system, to show me, oh, okay, this is the distance I need to put. Most time the border is for me to actually hack and test the system to see what is going on. So you can use border most of the time to see what is going on, to see where your margin has stopped, or where your margin started, or where your padding started. So imagine there's no border here, by default the border will be invincible because you did not specify the property. So what this is saying is that all elements possesses these attributes, possess these kind of characteristics. You can set these options up and then you can see them. Hence we have what they call the box model, meaning all elements in HTML is like a box. Okay, let's move on, and you can also test this out with even the H1 element. So if you put this and say you want to style your H1 to be like this, if you turn this to H1, you can see that the H1 also carry that same settings that you specify, because we've removed the class rule that we have here, we change it to H1 rule, meaning all these should apply to H1, and that's why we have that there in the system. Moving on. The next thing we have, I said I wanted to work with, is the CSS units. CSS has several different units for expressing length and width of a particular parameter. So it's very important that you understand how those lengths and widths are being defined. Many CSS properties take length, value such as width, margin, padding, font size, and still have same use. So I was talking about the CSS unit and what it's all about. You guys have seen me using numbers to denote the width of something, or the length, or how big it is, or how small it should be, and that's called units. In our normal day-to-day activities, we use centimeter, feet, all these things to measure what we do. In computers as well, there are all these things we use. We use pixels and EM and what have you. We're going to go in details as at what we use. But these units are in two forms: an absolute length and relative length. And we're going to define what absolute and relative is, and when we should use all these kind of measurements. Absolute length. The absolute length use a fixed, it's a length that is expressed. These lengths are kind of more precise, exactly. So when you say 3 centimeter, it's going to be 3 centimeter. And what that means is, irrespective of the device you are using, it's not going to worry that you are using a phone. It's going to still use 3 centimeter, and that's a little bit dangerous based on what you are trying to do, because everything you should be working towards is to make sure that whatever you are displaying is gonna look good on all devices, because you don't know who is gonna be using your device, if they're gonna be using it on the phone or on the desktop. So absolute length is more like the exact length. And most of the time what we use is pixels. You can see all the kind of lengths available. You have centimeter, millimeter, you have inches, which is good for printing, you have pixels, which is normally how the computer calculates the point on the screen. You have PT, you have PC, like that. You have all these. Most of the time we use pixels to specify the length, especially fonts, and width of the size of maybe a table or a div. So we use pixels a lot. But there's also other ones that we need to focus on, and that's when we talked about relative. But now we're looking at absolute. So when you're using absolute, you are saying that this is the size of what this should be. It can't change. That's what you mean when you say absolute. You're not expecting it to change. So irrespective of where you're looking it at from, it will still remain that exact value. So if you are looking at a font of 12 pixels on your phone and your laptop, they will look the same. They won't reduce or increase based on the fact that you are looking on a phone or on a desktop. They won't change. And that's where relative comes to play. That's relative length. Relative length is relative to your device or to other elements. So let's see what that's talking about. So we have relative length. Relative length uses relative length units specify a length relative to another length property. So it's either related to the entire screen or related to a particular element. What that means is, if you are looking, what you've done on a laptop, that's a desktop, what you are defining, you are saying it should be based on the fact that you are using a desktop. If you are using a larger screen or a phone, a mobile device, for example, it will also respect that and show you your content based on the fact that you are using a smaller device. And so that's where you have a sweet spot using this relative length. It's advisable to use relative length, and you have all these relative lengths defined on the left hand side on the screen. You have the EM and the definition, what it is, relative to the font size of the element. You have EX, relative to the X height of the current font. You have rem, which is what we'll be using most of the time, from now on, relative to font size of the root element. You have VM and VH relative to 1% of the width and height of the viewpoint, which is what I used currently. I will show you how that works. Relative to the parent element, and CH relative to the width of the 0. So let's look at how this relative thing works. We've demoed, or we've used pixels all this while, and then we don't have any issue with it. All the time we specify fonts, we've always specified them in pixels. But notice that I've changed how I specify my fonts, or well, yes, even with this one, for example, I specify using EM. Remember, EM and the rest, they are relative. So what that means is, depending on the device I'm working with, it will all be relative to the device I'm working with. So you can see that the font size are getting bigger and they are reducing because I'm using a relative kind of measurement. I'm using a measurement that is based on the kind of device that I'm looking at. So if you use just one particular measurement, let's see this one that is H1, and focus on using 12 pixels, or let's say 50 pixels. So this will not grow in width, so to say. It's not as if it's growing in width, it's just that it's breaking because the screen is breaking. So that's why it's breaking. So it's not as if it's increasing in size. So this one is giving you a different approach. So you can see that it became smaller here compared to when, you can see how it's small here compared to when you say 50px here. So you can see that here as 50px, it still maintained the 50px, and that's why you saw it increased in size. Okay, let's move on to what we have. So let me make this one 5. You also have percentage there. That's relative to the parent element. When you specify something in percentage, it's based on what the parent element is. So if the parent element was 100, it's going to use that. You saw us use that in table. When we're using table, we specify, we just say 100%. What that means, it just takes everything. And we also have, let me introduce that here. You can also do that here, for example. So when you say width, for example, so you can see it just did 100%. So you can be more specific, and provide a lower percentage, so that gives you that angle. But when you use absolute is going to be fixed irrespective of how you move around. It's going to be 200. It won't change from that. It's not based on anybody. But if you use this other one, they are based on their parent class or their parent element. I'm just going to focus on two forms of display. And those display that I want to talk about is inline display and block display. Inline display and block display. Very important that you understand these type of displays. I'm going to write several elements out, and these elements, you are going to see the kind of display that they are. So I'm going to clear this. So we have our P element, paragraph. Then I have my A element or anchor elements. I will say a link, right? And I want to have, so I'm creating as many elements as I can bring up. So this is like bold, that one which is span, which is, you will be using this span very well, but I need to officially introduce it here. It's also an element, and the work is just for you to have a placeholder so that you can put content in. Another one we've also introduced is div. Div is also a placeholder where you can put more elements inside to create a kind of parent and child element. That's the purpose. They don't really serve a visual, they don't have a visual representation of what they do, like paragraph, like H1 and what have you. So it's just span, div. Let me use soup. Yeah, I have other ones. Soup, we've used this before, and this for subscripts. And we have subscript as well, subscripts and subscripts. What I'm trying to explain here is display. So I have all the items here. Let me put them in a very good context so that we can have the font displayed in, let's see. Okay, now what I want to demonstrate right now is to show you which one is block and which one is inline. So what I want to do is to write our code inside this universal selector and tell it to display the border of everything. So display border of everything. How do we do that? So we do border, and I do 1x solid and red. So it has done that for us. You can see red going all the way. Let's increase it to 4. Okay, let me now start my explanation so that you know what is going on. But let me give a little padding so that we can see space for our explanation. Let me do 5px. Okay, let me increase that to 10. Perfect. This is perfect. Let me add margin. So let's start with our explanation. That's not what a box model is. A box model means that you have padding, you have margin, you have content, you also have border. We explained that. This is the content of an H1, and from the content to the border you have a padding, and from the border outside you have a margin. That is fine. What is the purpose of all this? The purpose of all this is to understand that there are some elements that is a block element and some are inline elements. What are block elements? A block element is such kind of element that does not allow other elements to stay side by side with them. For example, looking at all these elements, what do you notice? The H1 element does not allow any element to stand by its side. It just goes full, and that way it tells you that what? It's a block element. The next one is our HR element. The HR element, the same thing. It does not stand side by side with another element. And that's not because we broke it, we did a break here. That has nothing to do with the fact that we put them on a separate line. HTML does not respect that you do this. It doesn't respect that. It doesn't bother about that. The next one is our paragraph. Our paragraph is also what? Our paragraph is also a block element, or rather, yeah, a block element. Do you see the way it doesn't allow anything to stay side by side with it? Moving on to the next thing, our anchor element is what? Is an inline element. How? Why? See the way it allows another element to stay by its side. That tells you that what? When you are writing your A element within another element, it will work very well to stay side by side with other elements. You know, if you join it with another inline element, they will just sit side by side. They will not break. But if you join a paragraph with another paragraph, they will break. They can't sit together. Let me show you that. I just added another paragraph now, and I do paragraph 1 and I do paragraph 2. Look at what happened. They can't stay together. Let's do link 1 and link 2. So if I put this to be link 1 and I put this to be link 2, they work hand in hand. They don't have problems sitting, together. They are fine. This makes them what? An inline element, meaning they stay in line with other elements. But when you combine inline and block elements, one we take the whole of the width, the other one that is inline, we go to the next place and see if we can meet another person to stay with. So moving on, block element is also an inline. Span is also what? An inline. div, very important, is also what? Is a block. You can see what we use this div for is, as I mentioned before, is a container element to use it to put things together in a group. Imagine I want to put link, border and things like that, or bold and span together. I want to style them together and put them under one umbrella, I can put them under a div, because a div does not come with any special padding and margin. That's another thing I need to show you. Notice that our paragraph ideally has already some margin on the top. Do you notice that? But notice our div did not have any padding anywhere, because by default it doesn't carry any style. By default, your paragraph has a style that it carries, and that's fine. There's no problem about that. But that's just to give you the default state of things. You can always reset the default and make it whatever you want to make it. Continue from, to continue from where we stop. Notice the subscript. Subscript as well is also inline, meaning if you have an element, what subscript does is to put the font on top. Notice the bottom part, and the subscript from the name, it puts your text on the bottom. That's the purpose of subscript. So what this is proving is, what I'm trying to show you here is to tell you that there are two type of, for now, two, I don't want to get to other ones, two type of display elements. For now, we have block and we have inline. We have several types, but just to be to explain it easier for you guys to grab, we have block and inline elements. So this will take you a long way when you are designing anything, and to know, okay, I want to do block elements, I want to display something in a block, and you will see why you need that in a brief. I will do a quick example to display these stuff for you so that you see how that works. Let's even look at image. So if we put an image tag, so rather it's an inline model. Let me check. Yes, it's an inline. So if you see image here now, you can see that image is not this image. Don't mind that we didn't put the source, but the fact that it's not breaking down shows you that it's an inline model. So in terms of positioning is, I think, should be in the next class or thereabouts. Positioning should be in the next class. It's either next class or the next two class, because we need to take advanced selector after this class. We'll take advanced selector to help you out. Let me bring up something for us to design. Let's design something so that it's very easy for us to go from there. So let's design this card. What I want to do now is to save a copy of this and put it in our project so that we can have a view in our project on desktop. Let me call it something simple. Oh, okay, we have our card there. So this is for us to be able to toggle and see the design, what we are doing, to make sure that it's correct. And yes, let's go ahead. And I will try as much as possible to not do something that is more than what we have in this lesson today. And I will also use what we've learned in other lessons so that I will buttress, so that you learn from the previous class. So we have this card we want to design. This is the entire body. You should know that there's a distance from here to here and from here to here. So we want to create, first of all, something like this, a container, so that we can have all this inside. Now that tells you about the div, where the div come to play. In fact, that's the first example that I can start pointing out. Now there's no element per se that you can use to start putting this inside, so that you can put even though you can use a paragraph, which is fine, but paragraph already is being defined and it has a default state, it has a default settings, it has a default measurement already. Paragraph, when you're using a paragraph, it has a default settings. Sometimes you just want to use something that doesn't have any style attached to it at all, so that you can just add your own. You don't want to come with the baggage that it already comes. You don't want it to add the baggage that it already comes with. So a div, for example, does not have any affiliation with any other style. Yeah, you can just start styling by itself. So most of the time you'll be ending up using div because it doesn't have any style. It allows you to properly structure your HTML into a proper tagging system. So let's start. Maybe when I start using it, you are going to see what I'm talking about. So let's do, now these are our text, and I need to make it visible for you to see here. So we're using a div because div doesn't come with its own styling and everything. So let's start styling, and this will introduce us to proper CSS and everything like that. In the first lesson, we talked about what we did the other time. We talked about how you can style it. You can style, and what I mentioned is that how do you target a specific element. Another thing I didn't mention to you is that when you are targeting elements, you have to be very, precise on what you are doing. You have to be very, how do I put it now, conscious of the fact that you want to, because you are whatever you are doing, you have to be very conscious of it. The reason is because when you are calling these elements in your mind, you have to break down what you are designing in your mind and know what it is you want to do before you go into design. Looking at this itself, you already know that it's going to have a container, which is fine. And inside that container, you know that this is going to be one thing and this is going to be one thing sitting on their own. This is going to be something else, an image, and this is going to be something else. This is going to be another thing. So because we've not taught you positioning, I will just use table, to actually cook this up. I can just use table, and where it does not require me to use a table, I will just go ahead and use what other things I need to do. So let's go ahead and specify. Let's start designing. Other ways to design these, which I taught in HTML, is that you can first put down your content and not style first. Then when you've loaded everything into the HTML page, once you've designed the HTML page, then you can then start styling. So that's another method you can do. So any which one you want to do is preferable. You can do a dry run of the whole app, like design it first without putting style. Then when you visualize everything, you can then start putting style. So any one you do is okay as far as you get your results. So in your mind, I know that this is my background, or rather this is my parent element that every other thing is going to sit in. The next thing is I want to type this word. I want to write this word out, and then I know this one is on the extreme right. So there goes your question that you were asking me. How do you separate this? Because you know that if the element that you put here is very important, because if you put a block element here, it will not sit right with another element. So you have to put an inline element here that you can move, in a way that you want. But because you already know table, we can just use table to work our way out. By the time we talk about our positioning, we will redesign this again and you see our position work. Remember that when we were doing the greeting card we're doing, when we were doing it, we didn't do anything like positioning. It's just alignments. And what I was teaching you then was how to format text, how to format things to align it properly to stay in proper position, not positioning. So I don't want to teach positioning today. Okay. So let's go ahead and use table to break this out. So we do our table, and we have our TR, our TD. So we put 2 TD, meaning we're splitting into 2. We're putting one content here and we're putting this content here. Then you can put another row here. We're doing 3 rows, 1 row here, another row here, another row here. That's what we're doing. So we come here and we can do, so I say we are doing 3 rows. 1, 2. So this is the first row, this is the second row, and this is the third row. So that's what we've already done that now. So to give you a visual effect, you could do border is equal to 1 to give you a visual representation of what's going on. And we can do something to the style so that what we are doing is all visible. So let's start adding things to it. So we want to give the distance from here to here. We want to provide that distance so that our item can show, that display, that our div can show here, just like as it's showing here. We want to give that. So this here, we'll give it a name so that we can target it, and we'll call it card. This is our card. This first element is our card. and then you want to target it here with CSS. Notice that this is a class, so to do a rule for a class, we need to do .card, and we provide our code there. First of all, we can set the background. For now, we'll just use a fixed background, which is background color, and let's do black. So notice what happened immediately. Because it's a the kind of element that we have, it's a block element, so it takes all the whole space, and that's fine. It starts giving us the approach of what we want. So note that we need to specify from the top to this place, we need to give it a little space. So, and what is responsible for that is our margin. Very important. That's why we are teaching box model, so that you are able to specify, know how you can do this distance thing. So the margin property, I need to tell you about the margin property. So the margin property is in this way. So you can either specify margin as a whole, and whatever you put in here apply to top, left, bottom, right. I'll repeat that again. If you specify this format, say margin, and you put a single value, that single value is applied to the top, to the right, to the bottom, to the left. If you just want to specify one particular section of the margin, as you might see in the example, the top margin and the left margin are both different. You want to specify them to be different. You could actually go ahead and specify those things the way you want individually. So you can say you want the top to be, let's say, again, let's start using our new styling, our new nomenclature. Now this is now relative. We want it to be 3 rem, right? You're not specifying only for top. Then you want the left to be 1 rem. So you have to be careful with your spelling. And then you want your right to be also 1 rem. So you can do 2 or something. So that's it. So this is, if you don't specify bottom, you don't, because there's something at the bottom, so you can just ignore it. So this is another shortcut, or rather being specific. There is another shortcut as well, and all these things I'm explaining to you both apply to margin and padding together. Margin and padding are similar. They carry similar properties in the sense that you saw in the box model, the padding is content. After the content, you have the padding. Then after the border, you have the margin. So they carry the same way you write them. They carry the same syntax. So another way to write your margin is that you specify this. And this time around, you have a value here. 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 These 4 things denote top. In fact, let me write it down. Top, right, bottom, left. So this is a full syntax, or more of like a shortcut or shorthand to denote what top should be, right, bottom, left. So it goes in a circle from the top, right, bottom, left. So this is a syntax. Everything I've just explained now is also applicable to padding. Everything I explained now is applicable to padding. Now let's now start being specific. What do we want to have on the top? We said 3 rem the other time. Then what do we want to have on the right? Remember, immediately I put 3 rem, it's assumed that for everything. But if you now want to say right, you want it to be something, you can say right to be 2m. This is also a shortcut to denote top and bottom and left and right. So if you stop here, it means whatever you put here is for top and bottom. Whatever you put here is left and right. If you stop at 2, but if you go ahead to 3 and you do the third one is, first one is top, second one is right, the third one is bottom. So you say bottom is 1m, which is not visible anyway, but the left hand side is visible. Let's do 4m just for the purpose of visual display. So you can see that the 4m is bigger than the right hand. So that proves that this top, right, bottom, this top, right, bottom, and left. So you can see that the left part is more stiff. So you can see that to denote that. Let's go ahead and stick with this. Let's stick with this. let's stick with this one. So this is a little bit better. Moving on to what we are trying to do. Now that we've been able to have this kind of box inside here, we want our table inside. You can see where your content is starting from. There's a space before your border, meaning, and the way the table is being presented here, you can see that the table is too close to the border. So you can start putting the details of what will happen in there. But before we go in there, let's start writing out the content of what we have. So we have our word and I'll call this Wi-Fi just for now. We'll get the logo out. So let me put here and say word, and here we say Wi-Fi. But you can see that the text is not visible because the default text has gone to black and is conflicting with the background. So let's go ahead and say whatever that is in the table, we want to change all the colors in the table to white. Now this is now targeting a particular element. So we can say table and just say white, color white. So there are various ways you can style this. By the way, you can style it by targeting table, you can style it by targeting the entire body. So any which one you want to do is fine. So we've targeted that, and notice that the table is not having a width. You could either style your table from here or you could style it from here. So let's go ahead and style our table from here and say you want a width to be 100%. So now this is making use of our relative length that we just talked about as well. We specify that it's 100%. Notice that you are not doing most of the stuff here again. This is more cleaner way to do stuff. Writing your CSS code, here, and just presenting this one to be pure HTML. So all your styling should be done here. The next thing we want to do is we've achieved this. Let's go ahead and achieve this one here, and that's the middle one here. I'm gonna call this chip. We're gonna put our image for the chip later, but let's just call it chip here, just to have a frame to hold it. The last thing we have here is this section here is gonna contain this, and this one is gonna have our logo. That's Visa logo. I'm gonna come here and put our MasterCard logo, or let me call it logo. Then we go ahead and start imputing these numbers. So we have these numbers this way. We have 1, 2, 3, 4. We have 4 things right there. We have numbers. So I'm gonna put numbers. And by the way, you're gonna see where our div is gonna come to play now. We are getting there again. You see the importance of div. Now look at what happened. Immediately I put my number here, and you come back here. You have this valid true. That's a date. You come here and you want to put valid true. Notice what happened. Let me just do a traditional thing. I won't explain anything here for now. This is a traditional thing you will do. Valid true, and then you do your break. Then you put your month. Then the last thing is the name. So let's put we'll break. Last thing is the name. So process guide there. Okay, so this is a pretty simple arrangement. Let's go ahead, start designing now. Let's start designing. First thing we need to do, we need to provide a space from left to right. The space here is too tight. So how do you provide that space? Remember the box model. The box model that we are using for this div now is we've only implemented the margin. Where do you think the padding falls in? The padding falls in here. So if you implement your padding, this is going to be pushed inward. So let's go ahead and see and duplicate what we have here. Instead of this card now, we want to specify the padding. So if I use the same design, we're going to have the same effect. Hope what I did not confuse you guys. This is the box, this is the content. And we know in our box model, after the content, what comes in next? The padding. After the padding, what comes in next? The margin. So that is what I just did. I just presented a padding for us, and I'm now good to go on that part. Moving on, let's quickly see what we have again. But of course, our details are too stiff, so let's make it a little bit closer. So I have, let me do one. Okay, let me do two here, and let me do one here. That's fine. The next thing I want to do is, let's do this curve, right? That curve is called border radius. So let's add it to the card. It's called border radius. Don't worry about anything you're not, you don't know about here. We'll talk to this later. Talk about this later. So let's do 20. Okay, we are good with the word. We are good with this. Our font is not cool. Let's add our fonts to everything. Font type, font family. Let's pick this guy. Our font is okay now. The next thing you want to do is, okay, now this is a good, mind you, I'm still answering your question for the div, for the use of the div. So you are going to see how we're going to be using div, even though you've seen one example here. So we're going to move on and talk about another thing on the next part now. Now I want to style this word. There are various ways we can style this word. We can style this word here by putting this word in a container. Do you know you cannot target? The only way you can target this word is because it's inside a TD, like this. You can target it, by the way. If you want to target this guy, you can target it safely. In fact, let's target it, and let's say the way to target it is to give it a class so that you can target it and then you style it. So let's say card company, because that looks like what will be there, the company of the card, maybe the bank name or something. So this is the class you've given it, and you know that also all this name for the class is you that will create it yourself. It's not coded anywhere. It's whatever you call it, right, to start bearing. So here you come here, because it's a class, you now start specifying what should happen. Not what we want to do is to increase the font, because the font is much, so we need to increase it here. And what we are doing now is just to say font size, and we use our relative as too big. I think 6, 4, 3, 2. Okay, that's our word. The next thing is images. We're going to get images in batch later. We're going to skip this image. Let's go with this one here. So that's how we target by using, you can see that we made use of this TD and we add a class to it. We're able to style only this TD here, and we left this Wi-Fi alone. We're going to target that later. So we're moving on to this button that has quite a lot of content inside, but they are not in individual elements. We can't use this method to style that. We can't style it using, we can't target everything here like this, even though we want to target everything here, but we want to target them individually, mind you, because individually they are styled individually. They have different styling. This one has different character. This one is even smaller. Yeah, and you see that their fonts are all different. They are styled individually, so you can't group them this way and pick them one by one. So you need a method in which you can pick individually and style them separately. And the only way to do that is to put them in a kind of a container. By default, this is a container that contains this. But because you want to style these guys individually, so you have to further put them in a separate container. Hence, we have your div. And the reason why we're using div is because they are blocked. Look at it, they are blocked. They have different level. They are block elements. They are going to be displaying in block element. If they are staying side by side and having different styling, if this 12 and 23 were having different styling, we can put 12 and 23 inside separate elements maybe inside span, and let's style, in fact, we'll use that as an example. Let's style 12 and 23 differently, even though they have the same styling. But just for the purpose of the experiment, we're going to style them differently, and you're going to see, what we've been able to achieve. Now, hence, we need our div now. You can see that there's no other method to use to put these guys into a container than bringing in our div guy. So we are putting inside div. If we use p, remember I told you what p comes with a baggage. Do you see the baggage that p comes with? A paragraph, it comes with a baggage. Immediately it has a style to the top and bottom, which is fine because you can go back and remove the style, but that's a lot of work. Why do you want to do that? When there is a style, an element that doesn't come with any baggage, it just allows you to do your thing and you can go and style it. So that's why we have our div. Immediately I'm going to change everything here to be inside a div. Everything inside a div. Then we are going to start picking them up one by one and styling all of them. Now that everything is inside a div, what I want to do now is to provide the styling. But before you can provide the styling, you need to give them name, because we want to remember we're trying to target individual and style them separately. So let's give them a class name and go and style them. The class name for this is, I'll just say number. I don't want to start writing long details, but let me just write it. I think it makes it interesting. Let's just say card number. Then here I will say valid terms. So it's supposed to be class. Then here, remember what we said we wanted to do here. Let me skip that. So we'll come back to do it. Then here I said holder name. So I'm writing 3 rules for each of this. So let's start from the card number. I come here, I say card number, it has to start with a dot because it's a class. If it doesn't start with a dot, you are looking at it as an element, which is not. So dot means a class. We want to specify a different font because if you notice our card number, it normally has a different font. So there's one font that I know will look well. That looks like a code font. It's a code kind of font. So let me use this monospace. Yeah. For lack of font, I'll use monospace, and of course increase the size. Okay, yeah, that size looks okay. Let me reduce a little bit. Let me see what one we do. Okay, let's do that size. The next thing we want to style is our valid true. We want to change our valid true. Valid true. I need to see the spelling. Valid true. Oh, valid terms. That's what we'll call it. So I go to how that one is having. Okay, notice that it's in capital letter and it's smaller. Capital letter and it's smaller. So let's do that. So to change to capital letter, you use text transform. Then you say capital letter, or rather uppercase, and it looks smaller. So I'll copy this one and change it to 1 rem. Even 1 rem. So you can actually go into using this method, decimal. You can use decimal place to make it smaller. So let's see what we have. Notice there is okay, yeah. Let's do the name, the card holder name, before we do these 2 dates here. Card holder name. So holder name is just okay, it's also bigger kind of, but not as big as this one. Let's give it, so let's not give it 2, let's put 1.5. Yeah, that's cool. Now, what we wanted to do here, remember, is to demonstrate the inline. What we've been showing through is block display. We want to demonstrate the inline display for you guys to see the power of the inline and why you need an inline, because all this we've been doing is to block. What about the inline guy? We want to make this guy have separate color, right? The month and the year, so have a separate color. So how do you style this 01 separately from 25? Of course, you can use div, but when we use div, what happens? It will break both of them. Let me put the div so that you visually see it. You visually see how it's going to break both of them. Then if I do 25 here, so you can see how our div broke these guys into 3 different spaces, which is different from what is achievable, because the idea is we want to style them. In fact, let's go ahead and put the styling. We want to style them with months. I will say card months, and the other one should be card year. Mind you, the intention is not to break them, but I just want to put the style first before I put the solution. The solution is to put span there instead of div. You remember span that we talked about? Span is, younger brother of div, but span is inline. It's not a. Let's put it now. So let's just say span. So immediately you change it to span. What happens? It allows you to. You can see that it's playing well with the slash. Then when you put this one to span, it plays well with everything. It's now working well the way you put it. But the reason why we put it in a container is because we want to style our 01 and our 05 differently, our 25 differently. So let's go ahead and start styling it. So we have card month and card year. We want to change, want to give it a kind of a color, something bright, even though it's still going to be white, but we want to give it something bright. So we'll have our card months. So the color should be, I think, something okay. That color is okay. Then let's look for the year. So let me go with something blue. Oh, that's color shall. Okay. So this is what we've been able to achieve. You can see that we've been able to use the span and also the div to do this. Moving on, just to complete the whole card for it to look good, let's go ahead and start designing the background, right? I'm just going to bring something online. I'm not going to do anything. So let's bring up, okay, our chip. So everything that remains now is image. Let me put a name of a bank here. Everything that remains is an image now. We'll go on Google to search for image. So now we need our image. So let's look for Wi-Fi image quickly. So let's do MasterCard logo first. Quickly. So I need a logo that has transparency. That doesn't have. I hope this one is not black. Okay, it doesn't matter if it has background. It will just stand out. To make it stand out, it's fine. So let's do this guy. That logo is very big. So we go straight and put it as logo. Okay, we have already an image already logo, but let's see what we downloaded. Okay, this is pretty well. Our logo is good. It's good to go. The next thing we need to get is Wi-Fi logo. Okay. Which one are we going to use? We can just use any one, but let me see. I need the one that we have that will not have background. So let's search for transparent background. Sometimes this guy claims transparent background, but they are not. Let's see what it's having here. Okay, I wanted to look at, okay, it's white. So we're looking for a white one, because let's not go and look for a black one that will be on black. So white Wi-Fi logo. So we can see the first one has is cool. I think I know this site. I think they will do well. So let's do Wi-Fi and let's check what we downloaded. Wi-Fi. Okay. This background that is showing is not going to be correct though. Let's look at this one instead. So let's call this Wi-Fi 2 and let's quickly check. Yeah, you can see this one will work because I know that first one he gave us is not gonna work. The next thing, final thing, is to look for a chip logo or card chip. Yeah, good. So let's see, we were looking for transparent background. Which one I'm going to use? I don't know the one that's going to lie to us, because some will say this is transparent. And these guys are very big. I need something very small. It's going to pick carefully. So let's say chip. So let's quickly check as well. We have chip here. Okay, I think we have everything in place now. Let's go ahead and plug everything in. So let's go to our chip. Okay, we have our Wi-Fi first. We already know how to use image, right? We've already passed this class on how to use image. We use our image SRC. We specify our Wi-Fi. I think it's Wi-Fi 2. We have it there, but because it's very big, you need to specify the width. All the image we got were quite big, so I'm gonna do this, and it's looking cool. You can play with it to your own mind content to give you exactly what you want. And it was rotated to the right, but let's not go there. I don't want to go that way. It's gonna take a lot of time. Is it? You want us to rotate to the right? Let's move on. When we finish, you guys can ask. You can let me know if you want me to rotate to the right. Okay. The next thing is to bring in our chip. Then I'll do our IMG SRC, and I have this. Okay, so we wanted to bring in the logo. We have this. The name of the logo is chip. It's just called chip. And of course, I told you guys that it's very big. So that's what happened. Then we have our we can do 100 here, 100. But yeah, I just saw something. You notice that the image, the chip is supposed to be like in the front a little bit, but that's fine, Sha. Because in the original image, do you notice what I said? Yeah, you can see that there's a distance between here, and here is too close. Yeah, we can play with that. So let's just style that quickly. And to style that, you can add that style here and say class and tell it, you know, we can even do, let's play around with another kind of class and say ID is equal to chip. Since we've been using class for a long time, you know, I just want to introduce ID. You guys know what ID is. ID is a way to uniquely identify your elements. So there's no element that should be called ID, that should be called chip again. What you've done here, meaning there's no element that should be called chip again. Just want to show you what that is all about. So from here, you can do quite a lot. You can even remove the styling we've done here, but we can control it from our CSS we're about to write. So we'll come here, we put our ID, which is chip, and then you start specifying the width. The width can be 100 px, and you can see that, you know, instead of you specifying it from here, you can also control it with CSS. So we can do 90, and you understand block saying now, as in you can move it around. Let's say margin right, margin left rather. So you can do 30, to your mind contents where you want it to stay, and it should just fit in right there. And it's looking, yeah, that's fine. So let's move on to the next thing we want to do. The next thing we want to do is the logo. So let's go to where the logo is. We can just bring in our logo, img src, and we have logo. I'm not forgetting the background though. So our logo, we can reduce the size, width, and 100px. So we can increase it to, let me see how the original one looks like. Yeah, we're not using the same logo, but that's fine. Let's increase it to 150, 160. Then you can see that it's not sitting on the bottom. 160. I think that's okay. So the next thing I want to show you guys is the background. You can see that it's plain background. So let me actually move it and do something else now. What I want to do right now is create a background. I was supposed to do that immediately. We went to Google. So let's do background. You can actually do this. You can search a lot of things. Background. Let me do something like this. Okay. This is not the kind of background I'm looking. I'm looking for something that's already designed that will just allow me to pick and we can use. But if we do not see, we just move on so that we don't delay. Just want to use. Okay, let me do templates. Okay, I can see one here. This gold one is a template, but the problem with it is that it has a chip already aligned to it. We don't want anyone that has a chip. Okay, so what I can just do is I can do background pattern. So what that does is it creates your own kind of, you are creating, what will happen. You can print anything on a card, so you are creating your own kind of stuff. So we can do something. We need something dark, right? This is a very popular background. So we need something dark so that all the things we've done will come out, because we've done everything on white. So you need a very dark pattern. So if you do dark like this, yeah, this is paid, so this is not free. So quickly, let's just pick anyone and we'll move on from there. You can't pick anyone that has white. Anyone that has white, it will not work. Let's pick 3. Okay, let's go ahead. Let's move on. So I have this background picked. I'm gonna save it quickly. Save image. So I'll call it BG1, BG2, and BG3. So we're doing 3 background. BG1 saved. Let's go to the second background. I like this, but the whites will not come out well here. You will see. So I'm saving this one as well. BG2. BG2 is saved. The third background. This red is 2. BG3. So it looks as if it's 4 we are doing. So we do BG4. We're almost done, guys. We just need to, once we do the background, I think we're done. I'll take questions. Okay, so how do you then set your background? Your background is coming inside your card element. That's where we are setting our background. So we'll come in here, and this is where our card is. We'll come and set our background here. Instead of having our background color here, you can just have your background image. Our background image, and you specify the URL. This is the parameter, and we just have background 1 first. Oh, you can see that some of the background used some weird saving method. This AVIF will not show. We can just go and change it later. So let's just start with the one that is there. Wow, This is looking beautiful. I didn't know it would look nice like this. But let's see. Let's check the background 3 if there's any. Let's check the other background. Then before we finally move on with background to use. So background 3, this one looks like a curtain. We're not using background 3. So let's use background 4. Yeah, even though this one is not bad, but I think the first one we did was better. So let's do the first one we used was better. Then let me use it, then I'll polish it very well. It needs small polishing. So the background 2 we used was better. So let me polish it a little bit. And by polishing, I can see you can reduce the intensity of how many times it shows. We've been using this background thing for a long time. So by using background size, so if you do something like this, you're trying to kind of reduce what's going on there. You're trying to reduce what's going on here. So you can do something like this. I think it's better this way. 500 is cool. Okay, it's looking better. Let me play with some of the styles. Okay guys, thank you for staying to the end. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe and turn on bell notification in order to be notified when we release new videos. See you in the next one.